Next, I'd like to bring up John Bridgers. He's a land records consultant in the Department of the Secretary of State Land Records Management Division. He's also co-chair of the working group of Seamless Parcels, along with Pam Carver of Henderson County, and formerly Tom Morgan of Land Records before he retired. He's been a vital member of the NC Parcels project team. He has extensive experience in local government. John.
Thank you, Jeff. When I started out 20-something years ago, I was in Davie County, and then I was there in Davie County for about 6 years and went to Yadkin County. And when I went to Yadkin County as supervisor of land records, I thought, well, I know the law. I know what this Machinery Act is. Got up there, and there's like, well, we don't do it that way. So what happens, what I'm talking about is this morning is the what we've learned. So what I learned in that situation was that the legislature goes out and says, counties, y'all do this. Doesn't give any kind of direction on how to do it. And so all 100 counties interpret those statutes their own way, and while they're doing it all the same, they're still doing it different. It's all the same but different. So what we learned was there's a lot of different ways to do the same thing. So, but with this Seamless Parcels, it eliminates the duplication of effort, because in the GIS, we often had different state departments calling wanting our GIS data. And next day next week you'd get another department asking for your GIS data. And sometimes it may be the same department asking for the GIS data. And so with the Seamless Parcels, the county is able to say, go get it from NC1 Map. Don't bother me. So, and there's where it is, the website location there where you can tell them to go get it. So we also learned that there are many different local maintenance schedules. Some counties update their ownership changes and parcel changes, splits and combinations and so forth daily. It runs overnight. Some counties do it once a week. Some counties don't update, but maybe once a month or even more. So there's also a large variety of GIS capabilities amongst the counties. The larger counties have the staff to do what they need to do when they're offices. The smaller counties, you often got a GIS person who's also doing work in the front desk of the tax office. Or if they're in the planning department, they're reviewing plats or whatever it may be. So there's a wide variety of how it's handled in the individual counties. It's inconsistency in what's actually going into the CAMA data, the computer-assisted mass appraisal data, or the tax system. I know when I worked in Polk County, when I went to Polk County, you had the owner's name, then you had address 1, address 2, and then the city or town. Well, if there were one owner or a husband and wife ownership, they were in owner's name. If there were more than 2 people owning that, or if there were 2 couples on a piece of property, the second couple or the third and fourth people or more people went into address 1. And then their mailing address went into address 2. So there was an inconsistency in how counties across the state are entering their data into the CAMA system and getting that out so that it's standardized. That can be a problem. And probably of the 100 counties, you could count the counties on one hand, they're actually doing metadata. When I first heard about metadata, sometime about 1995 or 6, somewhere along there, our boss said, well, what is metadata? And so, well, it's data about data. And he said, well, we don't need that. Well, the problem is, if you've ever, I'd like to put metadata into example of going to the freezer and looking at what's those frozen packages in there. If you don't list what that frozen beans are, or that corn, or that, you don't know when it was put in there, if it's got freezer burn or whatever. It's the same thing with your data. If you don't know when it was put in there or where it came from, you don't know how good it is. Is it available to be used for actual queries and information purposes? Also, there's a wide variety of data distribution policies across the state. Some counties will charge data, a lot for their data, just to keep people from asking for it. That's the only reason they charge for it. They don't want to have to worry with or fool with people asking for their data. So they charge a lot of money for it. Some counties have it freely available on the website for data download. Other counties look at it as a revenue stream. And so they're looking at, this is money in. We're spending our resources in our county for this data. We're going to get something back out of it. So there's a wide variety there. And this slide here shows the CAMA programs, tax office programs across the state. And there's about 12 or so different CAMA companies, vendors. And you see that it's just a patchwork quilt across the state. Each one of those vendors, those CAMA programs, handles data differently. And even within a single vendor, individual counties that may be using an individual vendor handle their data differently. So all these obstacles had to be overcome there. And this is going back to the data distribution that I mentioned a while ago. We had, you see the green ones on the screen are the counties that charge for their data, and then the blue ones, it was freely available. So, some counties populate their stuff well, whatever they're entering in. Other counties don't do so well. It may be, in the county that I worked in Polk County, we used NC1 Tax or Cox and Company. You had a lot of stuff in there where you could enter data, but the counties may not be entering the data. It all comes down to the person who may be the newest person in the office sitting there doing data entry. Do they know what they're doing? Do they know they're supposed to be entering that into the system? So it may be a place in the CAMA system to put plat, book, and page, but they don't know they're supposed to be doing it. And just leaving that blank. They're not reading the deed to get that off the deed to put it in there, or they're not getting it from the plat as it's being split into the GIS system. Items such as year built, that may not be in there. A lot of counties just have a default date on their old stuff. Maybe we used in Polk County, we used January 1 of 1940. That was the default date. If you saw that, you know, well, it's probably old. Probably wasn't built in 1940. It's probably older than 1940. We also found out that some of the counties, things like building values, they may have the total tax value and they may have land value, but they didn't have building value. So we had to work out a way to, simple matter, subtract the land value, the land value from the total tax value, and you come up with obviously that's going to be a building value. But is it multiple building values? That's a question that sometimes we don't know. So what we're looking for is coordination structure as we're getting this out for the ability to give this out to the public. So we're not bothering you, the public's not bothering you as a county. They can come to NC1 Map and get it. You can see this like here at the professional conference. And we're looking for a minimum of 2 times a year to update this data in the system. Now, if somebody's looking for, as Jeff said earlier, our authoritative data or up-to-date data, they do need to go back to the county. But this is a way, coming to NC1 map, getting the data is for like initial research or whatever for the 30 acre parcels he was referring to earlier. So NC1 map geospatial portal has web services, downloadable data in the blog, and it also helps counties use the best available resources. So it helps with emergency preparedness. Think about the wildfires out in the western part of the state during last year and the floods following Hurricane Matthew. Able to use this data rather instead of going to all these individual counties and looking at the individual and having to switch off this county and open up that county, you could open up the multiple counties to see this data across wide areas of the state. Also can see municipal boundaries and other jurisdictions, such as hopefully we can get the fire districts and stuff in, and that's not in there right now. But hopefully that can be put in there. And that for insurance purposes and that kind of stuff. Transportation, if you're looking at a route planning, such as the remainder of Interstate 540 or NC 540 coming around Raleigh, notify where those landowners are that's in that area. Particularly if you're talking about around Charlotte, you're talking about multi-county jurisdictions of the road around Charlotte. And for public health analysis, if there's some kind of outbreak, we're talking about measles or whatever it may be, that could be, rather than going to these individual counties and having to waste time to pull this one up, shut that one down, open that one up, and get all this data. So, experience, commitment to the professional standards there, technical assistance, I'm pointing to Jeff here, and a data sharing policy. My personal belief is the more we work together, the brighter we're all going to shine. And persistence. So I'm going to turn it back over to Jeff.
Before we get to questions and answers, just a few more comments here. Looking ahead, right now we have 47 of the 100 counties where a data manager is signed up with an NCID to manage the data for that county and do transformations. So that's the map. The green counties there have their NCID person signed up and registered and approved. There's a combination. A lot of counties have readily downloadable data with all the fields needed for this. That's one way we can get it in there, but it helps. The more counties we can have signed up to do this themselves and make it a routine, the better. Some of the counties have even opted for a quarterly update. That's okay. We'll still do the quality control and publish it to NC1 map if you are inclined to do it 4 times a year instead of 2. That would coincide with your NCID needing to be updated, so that might work for some of you. Looking ahead, we want to fully populate the core fields. It's still some missing data in some of the counties, so it's hard to do analysis on some of them. We want to help counties collaborate where they may have common tax systems. Maybe there's some solutions there to populating the fields that are needed for this compilation that's statewide. We want to continue to communicate data sharing and the benefits. We're learning more and more stories about how people are using these data. We want to apply them to more questions and problems to get more value out of them, more leverage. Better document that return on investment. It's not a huge investment at this point after the initial grant, but we want to document what we're getting out of it and build a case for continuing to maintain this. We'll take questions now for any of the panelists. We had Cam McNutt from Water Resources, Brett Spivey, NC1 Map, John Bridges from the Working Group of Seamless Parcels and Land Records, and myself, Jeff Brown from CGIA. So, comments, questions? Okay, here, Tom. The question is, since EPA funded the original project under it was an exchange network grant, what do we know about how they're using it and getting value out of it? That's a great question. Early on, when it first came out, they were thrilled. The grant coordinator said it was one of his best projects in Region 4, this larger region in the Southeast. I think we need to follow up with some people. There was some turnover there and some of the key people who were watching this project and using it. So that's something to follow up on with EPA. Okay, Cam has some comments.
One of the big reasons that EPA was funding it so that to help us do the work that we're doing, that I was talking about, was to do water quality restoration. The water quality people that are in Region 4 EPA, they were really on board with this for us to be able to do this kind of having this real live cost information on what it would be to do the kind of restoration work that we're required to do by the Clean Water Act. So that's one way they're kind of using it. Also at that time, they didn't have a lot of workflows in the exchange network, and I think they really wanted to have something in the exchange network that wasn't like water quality data per se. So I think that was another motivation they had at that time.
And they were thrilled that there was a web feature service coming out of this. That was new for them, new REST web feature service. So it met their qualifications for the REST protocol for their WFS open service. So that was good. Good question. Question here. So the question is, we're paying lots of attention to the attributes because we're translating all the different ways that GIS acres comes in from a county. We're translating that to one standard field name. But what about the geometry? That's a good question. Do we do anything with the geometry? No, we don't. We accept the geometry as is. So it goes into the web feature service, the compilation, the statewide compilation as is. So it would expose if there were slight gaps or overlaps at county, where counties meet. It'll be shown and obvious if that's the case. I haven't seen a lot of that. I think they match up pretty well, really. I think years ago, counties have done this. Don is shaking his head. He's seen some anomalies, I guess. Go ahead. So the legislature was asking DOT to inventory all of its properties. All right, he found some overlaps between Wake and Johnson counties. So it was obvious in the compilation, right? So they showed some pictures of this to the General Assembly. And did you get any feedback? Okay, they're more concerned about DOT selling land. But we really can't, we don't have the capacity to even think about geometry. I mean, that's really up to the counties. They're the authoritative sources for parcel data, for representations of property. And it's going to be as is. And if they see this, if people ask them about it, maybe they can do minor adjustments. to reconcile with the neighbors. But it's the attributes that really count, and those little slivers, for a lot of analyses, it doesn't really matter. We're looking for parcels with structures or high building value, things like that. Was there a question over here?
Question.
Oh, there we go. So the question is, are other states taking the same approach, or do they manage parcels differently at a statewide level? And what do we know about that? Well, yes, there are some states. I think it's Tennessee, perhaps, that the state took responsibility for mapping property, and what's that?
Minnesota.
In Minnesota too. Some of the western counties, they have Bureau of Land Management involved, and very different cadastral approach out there, and it's somewhat easier, I think, to come up with a statewide approach there. We have been in discussions with Virginia. They were very interested in what we were doing. I think we have some advantages in North Carolina in that we do have 100 counties that are responsible for this. We don't have cities and towns that are responsible for property mapping, like some of the northeastern states, where it's it's all cities and towns doing that property management. So I think we'll learn more. We did present this to the National States Geographic Information Council Committee, and there was interest there from some other states. That's a good question. Any technical Python questions? No? The question is, what's the incentive for counties to populate more of the fields that become part of the standardized set? You have any thoughts on that, John?
Well, one of the things is that the legislature sometimes asks the different departments in state, the Department of Revenue or your department or whoever, for some information for whatever it is they're talking about. And so they want that information like right now, yesterday. And so the more data that we've got from the counties that we can put into this system, the better that answer can be gotten back to the legislature without having to put a query out on listserv like, well, what does your county do with this? And maybe getting 15 counties to answer. So now, what's the incentive for the individual county sitting there doing that? I don't know. But I think that's a worthwhile goal to try to get the counties to do that so we can get better service back out to the people.
It's a good question. I mean, it may save them going back and generating another table of, say, the number of structures per property. When the wildfire comes, for fighting forest fires, knowing where there are properties in harm's way and high-valued properties, that counts for a lot. So if they haven't been populating that, they may realize that if they had, it would have saved a lot of time for them and for the forest folks. I wish Pam Carver were here from Henderson County, our co-chair of our working group. She had a realization, really, looking at what fields we had in the standard and then getting some questions from some of the users, some of them the consumers. She wanted to be able to serve them. She just didn't realize that having the number of structures in there or the description of the use of the property would really be valuable to some of the consumers. So I think the more stories we have, user stories, the more feedback from you all who are consuming it, we can get that message to those of you who are managing the data. Here's a question. Oh, sure. there's our segue to our contact information. Contact John Bridgers or Pam Carver of the working group, but certainly I'd be glad to hear from you too, Jeff Brown, jeff.brown@nc.gov. Or if you know Kat Clifton or anybody else in the local government committee. But yeah, please give me feedback. Any other comments or questions? Oh, yeah. Go ahead, John.
Well, I want to say something about the overlapping of county lines or gaps or whatever that Don was asking about. Joe Blow citizen out there just thinks of the parcels across the state as like a great giant jigsaw puzzle and everything matches perfectly. Well, we all know that it's not true. That you've got, within the individual county, you've got parcels that overlap and you've got gaps in these deed descriptions and so forth. Well, the same thing's true among the counties. But if your county line, if as a county you're not using the county line as provided from the geodetic survey as the same county line that your neighboring county is using, then you're going to have a gap of overlap. And that could lead to some land not getting taxed, or it could lead to double taxation. Also, the Department of Revenue is kind of cracking down on the taxing across county lines because a county has the duty to tax everything within their county and has absolutely no authorization to tax anything across the county line. And the department, and we all did that. All 100 counties did that. You take that one, I'll take this one. Because there was no good way to map or know how much acreage was in a particular county. So we just did that as a parcel by parcel basis, whatever the county line was running through. But with GIS, it's easy to figure the acreage in either county or each county. So if your county local government person and your county is swapping parcels with your neighboring county, then you need to stop. That's just it right there.
Let's thank our speakers, John Bridgers, Cam McNutt, Brett Spivey. Good job, guys.